Welcome to a dialogue on accountability in the digital age. A dialogue with our global multi-stakeholder community, representing national and local governments, international policymakers, civil society, NGOs, the ICT industry, as well as other relevant organizations and institutes.
Hi everybody, my name is Arthur van der Wees. I am co-director of the Institute for Accountability in the Digital Age. Here, the backdrop, the Peace Palace in The Hague. I'm currently located in Amsterdam. And today we have Kai Hermsen with us to talk about quite a lot of interesting topics about his initiative with the Identity Valley. And Kai, very welcome. Very happy you have some time in your busy schedule.
Well, thank you very much, Arthur, for having me, and it's a pleasure to talk to you.
We have been talking before about a lot about cybersecurity in your previous position, which one of the main, let's say, key factors and components. But of course, there's way more necessary in a digital age to get things sorted. So can you talk a little bit about your current initiative with the Identity Valley?
Yeah, thanks, Arthur. You already said it. Cybersecurity is an important piece of I call it the digital puzzle, but it's not the only piece. It's probably the one that gets a lot of attention right now, or has gotten more and more attention, which is good. That's exactly what we've been fighting for with the Charter of Trust over the last 3 years, where when I remember when we started some three and a half years ago, it wasn't really a mainstream topic back then, though it should have probably already been, because in 2017 we saw these big attacks called NotPetya, WannaCry, that actually already had a big impact on the economy, if not on society, and there weren't really many solutions out there. And that's exactly how the Charter of Trust then formed, and a group of companies said, let's do something about it and try to influence it for the better. Now, cybersecurity is a topic that is now being tackled. I do think we need to do more, and Arthur, I think there we agree that of course more needs to be done, especially also on an international level, on how do we deal with cybersecurity as such? How do we deal with cybersecurity attacks or cyber attacks? What I came to realize through this process, through working on cybersecurity for such a long time, is that there's more pieces to that digital puzzle. So cybersecurity is definitely an important one because it's the technological background for us to be safe and secure on the internet, but there's other pieces. For example, if people are not digitally literate on data and how there's opportunities, but also big risks with digital technologies, cybersecurity doesn't solve it. We need people to be literate. And then there's more things to it down the data stream, if I may say that. So cybersecurity for me comes second, because it's kind of the technical basis for responsible data behavior. And then there's of course other things like privacy, which is more the people basics, right? All of a sudden people come into the picture and say, rightfully so. Then we need to realize that data that is not person related also has a certain value. We call this data fairness, and on we go. And we formulated this into what we call the digital responsibility goals. 7 goals that kind of describe the whole chain, if you will, on how we can behave digitally responsible in a digital world, or in a world in which we are, because I don't want to separate into a real world and a digital world. I don't think that distinction works anymore, because here we are talking real face to face, but of course it's somehow digital, right? And that's what Identity Valley is doing. So as an initiative, we formulated these digital responsibility goals. We are a think tank that thinks about how to put these into place, and we're working with important partners to actually make it happen.
Yeah, very good, Kai, and very important work. And indeed, the word goals, of course, reflects or links also to the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs of the United Nations. Can you talk a little bit about the connection or the intertwinedness of the digital responsibility goals and the SDGs?
Oh, absolutely. And yes, the link is not by coincidence, of course, Arthur, but it's on purpose. So our mission, our purpose at Identity Valley is to be more responsible in the digital age. The way to do this for us was to think about a good tool that could achieve that, that could somehow simplify a very complex challenge like that digital world or space that is going in all kinds of directions, producing good, very many good things, but also a lot of negative things like hate speech, like fake news, also some other very bad things that are happening on the internet, like, for example, depiction of child abuse. You know, a lot of things are happening that we as a society actually don't want. The tool we found was already existing, and that is the SDGs. So we thought, oh, well, wait a minute, there's another very important complex challenge that we as a society, that we as a humankind are facing, and that is that of sustainability, climate change, and equity, which is formulated in the Sustainable Development Goals to guide, to provide guidance, to provide measurement, and to also provide ideas for action, so to say. That's the SDGs. And we took that tool and applied it to the digital world, and the outcome are the DRGs. It's only 7 goals as compared to 17, so it's less goals. We do see them as complementary. So it's not to say that the SDGs don't matter, quite the opposite. Actually, the SDGs are the guiding theme, and they are the ones that are internationally accepted already. So of course, they're much more mature and advanced than our idea of the DRGs, the digital responsibility goals, but we really see them as complementary because we believe that only if the digital world is more responsible, we will be able to also move forward with the needed pace on the sustainability side of things, because we need digital innovation and we need responsible digital innovation to make the SDGs actually achievable. And that's how they complement.
Yeah, yeah, very good. There are 7, of course. You can debate whether there should be 8, 9, 10, 12 or way more. I think it's a good number. 17 is indeed a massive amount. The targets behind the SDGs are even more, and those targets are definitely not exhaustive. If we would fulfill them all, everywhere in the world would be great improvement, but we would not be there yet. With the 5 Ps of the United Nations, people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership, all 5 combined. Are we with all the things that are happening in the world, in the digital domain, sustainability, just the examples you just mentioned, but many others, we all know about it. It's on the front page. You know, are we still learning or not? Why is things going, you know, so relatively slow? Or in my point of view, it looks sometimes that it's not even moving forward.
Yeah, I see that. Sometimes I share the same observation, Arthur, which of course is frustrating to see that on both the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and on digital responsibility, we might not be moving forward, but actually backwards, right? Where unfortunately, sometimes business models, now talking about digital, sometimes business models that are not responsible are more successful, right? That make more money and somehow then influence and maybe even hold back other business models that are more responsible, right? Because they're dominating somehow the market, and that is frustrating. However, at the same point, at the same time, for us, that's the motivation to be active and become active. You know, that's exactly why there is something that needs to be done. And I do see myself and Jutta and the other folks that are working with me or with us on this topic as the ones that want to drive the change. And there are some, and that number and that group is growing, that realize, we can make a difference by becoming more responsible, and it's on us as leaders, as leaders in the digital space to make that change. So it's interesting that this whole impetus is coming more from the economy right now than from other actors. But in the end, it needs all actors, it does need the government, it does need societal actors, and it does need the economy to go in a more beneficial direction for all of us. One last thing. What I realize is that the ones that want to make a change are the ones that by themselves most of the times have already detected that there is a challenge. So what's difficult is to reach the ones that don't even realize that we have a challenge there. And there are unfortunately some that don't relate to it, right? That don't, even digital experts say, so what? Where's the problem with the current landscape? The number of people and the number of organizations that realize that something is odd is growing, and that is because we see these externalities more visibly. Two examples that I can give you is, for example, the storming of the Capitol at the beginning of this year, which people, even the ones that wouldn't call themselves very digital, realize, okay, this somehow happened because in the digital sphere, people were agitated to do something, and then it had real world effects. And the other example that we all live through right now is, of course, COVID-19, where there were high hopes in digital technologies, and literally few of them, if any, were actually fulfilled, right? Because it was all coming very slow, not very reliable, and produce these big externalities like conspiracy theories. And we now see in practice that unfortunately that leads to us not being as efficient or effective even in combating COVID-19. So it now becomes more visible, which in a way helps the change, because it shows us that it is about time to make a change.
Well, absolutely, Kai, and of course, our institute has the same, gets a lot of energy out of the negative. Right, we try to jujitsu the negative to a positive, and is really happy to work together with you. And as you can see in the other dialogues, there's a growing number of organizations and leadership to work on it. We're not going to solve it, but we can work on it. It's an evolutionary thing. We need to go fast because indeed the technology and other developments also in climate domain are going faster than humankind currently. We only have a evolutionary, probably evolutionary capability to change in the way that we have done for thousands of years. So I'm really happy to again to work with you. I have a thing about responsibility and accountability. So we generally use the word accountability in order, which comes just after responsibility. So ethics is all the way up. We have no opinion about that formally in the Institute. Behavior is next. We have no opinion about it formally, but of course you need to be able to demonstrate or explain why you made a certain decision or why you did not something, right? Because the not acting is sometimes even more impactful than acting. And also when necessary, defense. That is not what we're focusing on, but the demonstration of your responsibilities in an ethical behavior way. We're not into the ethical domain here, because we want to work on a global level. But then again, there are universal values. We have the SDGs. All the countries signed for it, and some other treaties that people signed for it. So yeah, on that perspective, what are your your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned very interesting and important kind of distinctions between behaviors, ethics, accountability, responsibility, and it's important to understand that and to have it analyzed. What happens frequently is with the DRGs that people go like, it's about ethics. You are these ethics, social, societal ethics experts. And no, we're not. The ethics for me is a discipline that is not prescriptive, right? So yes, you need to be somehow, hopefully, more and more software engineers become somewhat literate in ethical thinking, because then you can ask yourself the questions: is what I'm doing, is what we're doing here right, and should it be this way, and so forth. And I think by and large, that's exactly what we're witnessing, is the change from the question, can it be done, to should it be done, right? And that's exactly kind of the distinction. And yes, in a way that's about ethics, but the way that we approach it is to think more about the behaviors and about responsible behaviors. And that's exactly what's depicted in the DRGs. And by the way, the SDGs are written in a similar way. They're not prescriptive in a way like what is good and what is bad, but it's about which behavior is desired for something to be good or in line with the goals. And that's exactly how the DRGs are also written. We talk about which behavior is desired. We don't talk about what is good and what is bad in the sense of what kind of data is good, what kind of data is bad, what kind of business model is good, what kind of business model is bad, what kind of use case is good, which one is bad. Because that would not be dynamic, right? Because then you would kind of stand still, because you have depicted something that is limited to today's reality, right? We don't know which kind of data will emerge, which kind of business models, and which kind of use cases. Hence, we need to describe the behaviors. And that's working well to our understanding, because then you can go back to this description of the behavior and say, now I know if I can check if my behavior is responsible or not. And then you mentioned something very important, Arthur, and I think that's a brilliant separation in the English language, which doesn't necessarily, for example, to German, it doesn't translate the same way, but it's about responsibility and accountability. But it's two separate things that both merit to be in place. And it's no surprise that good organizations have a very good structure organizationally of who is accountable and who is responsible, right? And that's exactly what we also need to see. So, well, we call them the digital responsibility goals, but they wouldn't work if people or organizations wouldn't take accountability for it at some point in time. And that's, I think, where we need to listen very close, because there's a lot of organizations, companies out there that say, yeah, of course, we take responsibility for the digital world. The question is, do they also take accountability? And one last thing, I think our goals even help them to take accountability, because it makes their behavior measurable. So that's the vision, is to also have a certain level of measurement, so to say, in which people can take accountability, because they can say, I know in these areas I'm already doing or applying responsible behavior. In other areas I'm not, but I'm focusing on them now. This is my next to do for the next quarter or year to become better there.
It's definitely very contextual, ethics and behavior. And therefore, I agree, responsibility and then accountability right after or during. Accountability is before you act, while you're acting, and after. It's not something like a supply chain. The same with responsibility. It's not a static thing that you, oh yeah, now I need to tick the box on responsibility. I think that's the dynamic, and the fact that it's quantum, it's in multiple places in a parallel time makes it sometimes difficult for people. Although, in my point of view, it's just human nature. But because of the fast pace of the 21st century, we have sort of forgotten about it, to think about it, and it's up to you and me to try to balance it out a bit. My question you on the digital literacy, cybersecurity, privacy, data fairness, you mentioned those four. A little bit about a couple of minutes about the other three, which are trustworthy algorithms, transparency, and human agency and identity. Can you talk a little bit about those three? And perhaps also in the way of, we can talk about responsibility from our end or organizational, but also more a societal way in a multi-stakeholder approach. Perhaps some thoughts about that.
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for mentioning and pointing them out, because it's 7, and only if you look at the 7 in their totality, for me, they make sense. Well, let me rephrase that also. Of course, looking at cybersecurity isolated or as one is better than not looking at it, that's for sure. But I do believe that ideally, your activities on cybersecurity are tied into your activities to privacy. Actually, sometimes they're even going in different directions. We see that happen, and you can only tackle that if you have kind of the roof on top, and maybe that's kind of the thing holding it together is the digital responsibility code. So yeah, you already said. So it starts with the person, it's digital responsibility. That's actually very societal level, because if we don't all together as organizations and government and education system care for digital literacy from preschool to post-retirement, I don't think it can be responsible, because people are not literate in navigating in the online world or even in the offline world, right? That doesn't work. And on purpose, I say that's for the whole society. I'm not in a primary school here, but I'm talking preschool to post-retirement. An entire society needs to be more literate, and we cannot leave that to learning by doing. That's not how it works, but we need to think about different approaches to it. Cybersecurity, we mentioned, is kind of technical basis. Privacy is the personal basis for use of data. We talked about data fairness, where it's all about the value that data has and the value with which data should be treated. That actually has a very economic dimension, right? Because we see what happens if the data is not valued fairly. That creates monopolies, and that's what we're dealing with now, because we only realized that that's the case when the monopolies were already there, right? So now we're kind of fighting the symptoms rather than thinking about why did it come that far, right? And that's exactly why we're talking about data fairness, which is an interesting one. A lot of people listen up when they hear about this, because this hasn't been in the discussion yet. Then we talk about trustworthy algorithms, which is then the use of the data, right? So before, you see, there was always kind of it was upstream, right? The data is created, it's personal data, it's non-personal data. It needs to be kind of go through the system in a secure way. All of a sudden, it's being used in algorithms. We don't talk about trustworthy AI, but about algorithms, because we think that the majority of algorithms isn't AI yet, but still it needs to be trustworthy, right? So, and also AI is just an algorithmic system, so it's a very sophisticated algorithms. We need to think about ways how this can be trustworthy. That's about people actually know that there's an algorithm helping them to make decisions, for example. That's where it starts, right? And that isn't always the case. Of course, it needs to be fair, it needs to be non-discriminatory. So we believe there's a lot of descriptions out there already on what that actually means to have trustworthy algorithms. Now it's more about applying it, right? Number 6 is about transparency. And rightfully so, people often ask, is it only transparency, or shouldn't this also be in a way accountability, for example? Yes, it should. So maybe transparency doesn't go far enough, and that's exactly why we're having these discussions, because the DRGs as such are still forming in a way, right? They need to prove that they are the right goals to pursue. They are dynamic, and they're taking shape as we speak in all our discussions. But the transparency is really about demonstrating which principles do you put into place in your digital endeavors. And that's super important. And then the last one, number 7, is about human agency and human identity, which we believe, again, closes kind of the whole pack and again has a very personal people dimension. Human agency means that all digital technology in the end should always be under the agency of humans. And we really believe that's important. So it shouldn't take its own dynamic too much in the sense of technology is creating technology for the sake of technology. But technology is created for the sake of humankind, of nature, of the world, you know, to improve it and to make it better. And only when we do that can we safeguard our own identity. And that's kind of also the link back to identity, because people often ask, so why are you called Identity Valley? But we really believe that's the very core of a digital world, is to safeguard our own identity, which is in itself a very complex construct. And only yesterday I've been asked, can you define identity? And I said, I can give you my very own description on what I think about when I think about identity, but there isn't really a very good, unique description of identity, because the construct as such is so rich and multifaceted, like we are as humans. And that's exactly the fascination with it. That's exactly why we have to think about it, because we shouldn't be treating it very lightly as we have been doing over the past couple of years, but this is at the very core. And that's exactly why these 7 goals are formulated this way and end with identity. Does that make sense, Arthur?
Yeah, it does, of course. Thanks for explanation. And I agree that, you know, the summary topic or the summary words in a goal is quite important, but it's only a word, and there's so much under it and intertwined with it. The same with the Sustainable Development Goals, which are just 17 words as well, including Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is peace and justice, which is one of those that we are focusing on, including, and of course, including 17 as our core goals at our institute, which is partnership. And then we try to address the other 15. Not everything at the same time is way too much. And also with that, Kai, I think also these 7 deserve probably, you know, each 10 or more subsets or topics, including indeed identity. And perhaps we can talk about it next time. But unfortunately, I do have to close this dialogue, this first one. So thank you very much, Kai. It was really a pleasure. And I am sure we can talk about a couple more, and perhaps we will later on. In my point of view, we should. But for now, thank you very much. And for the listener, thank you very much for listening and looking at us. So, Kai, thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur, and also thanks to the audience for listening in, and happy to come back anytime, Arthur.
Okay, that's the deal.
Thank you
All right.
for having me.